I want to tell you about Elon and May Musk Halderman. So I received a letter from someone who claims to have had contact with Elon Musk and May Musk in the past, and they wanted me to share certain things about it and allow each person to decide for themselves what they think of the situation. Now, again, I don't know if any of this I'm about to present is absolutely true. I will leave links to everything that I find as I process the information here and as I walk through some of the things that were presented in this letter and see if there's any corroborating evidence that I can find. I'm going to keep the sender of the letter anonymous because they asked to remain anonymous. But otherwise, I'm going to share with you some parts of the letter and some things that I found interesting about it. The letter states, quote, Elon is Illuminati child. He is a front put in place generations ago and with teams of Luciferians propping him up as a puppet before nations. He is helping lead the great deception, and he's also ready with the mark of the beast, end quote. And of course, we're talking about the passages from Revelation 13, the image of the beast that must be worshipped, the mark of the beast that is presented. Even if what these folks might be planning is not the exact prophecy fulfillment as intended in the scriptures, one has to admit that there's no way to deny the overlap of circumstances here in imagery and in reality. It's no longer different. The metaphor is reality now. So Elon's mother, May Musk Halderman, was born in 1948. Now, lots of interesting things happened in 1948, and if we just take a glance at a list of celebrities that were born in 1948, you can say that they have been important in culture, in society. And of course, that could be said for anyone born around that era who became entertainers or sports figures or people that were of high influence in society. So it's not to say that there's any major significance, but just to show a list of those that were also born in 1948. So she was born in Canada, and she's actually a twin and one of 5 children. And here's an image that she tweeted out back in May 15th, 2017, which, if you know about history, May 15th happened to be a day a particular war began in the Middle East back in 1948. Now, the thing about twins, too, I'll just mention that there's always something interesting about twins, and we know that people of more nefarious origin, especially in our secret governments, seem to take an interest on twins as well. So, something to keep in mind. Now, there's an MSM article that was published in June of 2018 in the money section, and it states, quote, in 1952, when Musk was only 4 years old, this is May Musk, her parents flew the family 22,000 miles around the world in a plane her father had bought in pieces from Canada, according to the New York Times. Also during her childhood, she and the family would often explore the Kalahari Desert searching for its mystical lost city. They retraced the footsteps of Canadian adventurer William Leonard Hunt, alias Guillermo Farini, who claimed he had found the ruins of a massive ancient city while crossing the treacherous desert in 1885. Dozens of expeditions over the following century were launched in vain to find the lost civilization. So, already, we're talking a major exposure to just all this ancient, mystical stuff. The occult that has been hidden. Her family apparently was on an exploration to discover these things. I mean, you think maybe the eye of secret intelligence were on these folks, or at least helping or assisting, or maybe even funding the whole thing? So getting back to the letter here, it mentions May's father, Joshua Haldeman, and I did a little bit of digging on him. Now, the letter mentions that he was arrested in Canada for the crime of technocracy. Now, this was interesting because as I started to look into who Joshua Haldeman was, I found a couple interesting things to consider. First off, according to elonmusk.info, this is Elon's grandfather, Joshua Norman Haldeman, who was a chiropractor, political activist, pilot, cowboy, adventurer, and had an all-around entrepreneurial spirit. Born on November 25th, 1902 in Crow Wing, Minnesota, though his family relocated to Heber, Saskatchewan in 1906 or 1907, he passed away in 1974 in a plane crash. Now, again, this website, elonmusk.info, with the extension here, goes into the history, his chiropractic background, which he started a chiropractic school between 1922 and 1926. And he went back to farming between 1927 and 1934. And it says here, however, due to the Dust Bowl conditions and the Great Depression starting, Joshua lost his farm to creditors around 1934 when he could no longer make payments for equipment he had purchased with a bank loan. So he was very upset about that. This supposedly left him leery of financial institutions and bureaucracies throughout his life and led to his avid social/political involvement. Due to the farm loss, he worked various jobs, etc., etc. And this, again, this timeline ends in 1936. Now, this is very fascinating to consider because at the time, according to Canada's history.ca, the last utopians, technocracy promised depression-weary Canadians an end to their hardship, but the offer came with the catch. This was published in January 1st, 2018, and it outlines the growth of technocracy out of the depression-ridden rural Manitoba. And they discuss technocracy as something that flared like a comet in the dark 30s because it promised to replace collapsing capitalist systems with a non-political government of scientists and technicians. That's what it was, this totalitarian approach with technocracy where the engineers basically run everything. And they had all these economic and geopolitical plans to merge Canada, US, and Mexico. These are things that are familiar to people who have studied the New World Order. The article goes through a man named Walter Friars, who basically started preaching technocracy through the Winnipeg Press and, got technocracy out there. But here's where it gets interesting. I'm going to read straight from the article. Quote, by June 1940, with the war in Europe going badly, the Canadian government suddenly announced the banning of technocracy, along with a dozen other organizations, including Jehovah's Witnesses and the Communist Party. In the House of Commons on July 16th, Prime Minister Mackenzie King defended the ban by saying one of the objectives of technocracy was to, quote, overthrow the government and the constitution of this country by force. Walter Friars, now 94, remembers, quote, we were astonished when the RCMP padlocked our section premises and took records, furniture, everything. No charges were made. Other technocrats were not so lucky. A Regina chiropractor, Dr. J.N. Haldeman, faced trial as a member of an illegal organization. He was acquitted. F.E. Demorest of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, was fined $25 for having paid for a newspaper ad protesting the ban. The conviction was overturned on appeal, and as far as known, no other convictions were sustained. No evidence was presented that technocracy had advocated violence, and the ban was rescinded without explanation on October 15th, 1943. Now, this article outright mentions Dr. J.N. Haldeman. This is categorically Elon Musk's grandfather, and this is May Musk's father. He was arrested for the crime of technocracy and being part of a secret organization. And he was let go? That's really interesting, folks. Remember, this is all happening before May Musk was even born. The article goes on here to say the end of World War II brought renewed concern that the North American economy, which had flourished to feed the war machine, might plunge back into a depression. Technocrats quickly rebuilt, and on July 1st, 1947, a caravan of 600 technocracy cars rolled into British Columbia into, quote, Operation Columbia. The convoy had begun in Los Angeles and timed its arrival for a speech in Vancouver by Scott, that's Howard Scott, the man behind Technocracy Inc. He filled the old Vancouver Forum with 5,000 adherents who each paid $1 admission and shouted technocracy slogans. Reporter Charles King wrote in the Vancouver province that Scott, speaking in a, quote, bored, sleepy voice, attacked the press of the United States and Canada as, quote, the most reliable source of misinformation in the world, end quote. Wow, who does that sound like? 10 years later, the post-war boom in full swing, the movement still managed to attract other adherents, and it goes on. But isn't it interesting that this declaration of technocracy and social change takes place in 1947, and within a year, May and her twin sister are born. And of course, July 1947, I believe, is also the Roswell crash and that whole situation. So many strange things going on in that time, not the least of which also, I believe, 3 months after the Roswell crash is the birth of Hillary Rodham Clinton, which, you know, if we're talking about weird Genesis 6 stuff going on, 3 months might be enough time to, you know, just a theory. The focus seems to be in that era because it seems to have been a moment where things changed and shifted in a very dramatic way that helps us understand why we're at where we're at today. And that's including the positive and the negative aspects of the flourishing of a technocratic society, which is what we're in now, and what the agenda is behind that. And if you think of it in those terms, then it's quite possible that people are being bred to be world leaders. And that's something that seems to make sense in light of today's pseudo international corporate systems that are pretty much at the top being run by a single entity. So for the first time in recorded human history, or at least publicly acknowledged, academically acknowledged history, we have this technology that can manipulate humans in so many powerful ways that it is almost inevitable that such capacities would be abused. And what we're learning in this decade is that, yes, in fact, it has been abused, and algorithms that were known to create addictive loops in your brain were implemented in social media as part of the fabric of how humans interacted and communicated with each other. And you can't totally blame the technocrats by themselves because the population at large had to buy into it as well. And everybody bought into it because it was new and shiny. Nobody took the time to stop and think of the potential risks and dangers. Although, having lived through that entire era of the explosion of social media, I can tell you that there was this unspoken, eerie suspicion about the entire thing. But people responded in such positive ways on the outside. You know, they became as superficial as the platforms were presenting them to be. And I noticed the personality changes and shifts in behavior within people all around me, including myself. And so we live in this very strange time where if we look back sociologically, we will recognize many, many changes that came about with the construct of social media, which could not have happened unless the communication technologies were in our hands. So even though they figured out these algorithms many years ago, they couldn't really implement it at a large scale until these types of communication devices between people were available, because there's a thing called the network effect. And once a network effect takes hold, then things can grow much quicker, much faster, and you can spread it like wildfire. Things go viral. All these concepts that we just consider as normal, these were implemented purposely because they knew that given this accessibility, we will take advantage of it and we will willingly exchange our privacy for social credibility that can be quantifiably measured with the number of likes or, thumbs up or whatever is the metric that's being used on these platforms. They don't reflect reality. They reflect a small piece of reality. And, how many people would look at these things and like it or love it and not, give it a thumbs up or not share it or whatever. So it doesn't reflect reality, but in this occasion, perception becomes reality. And that's the danger here of this technology. The perception of ourselves is being warped and manipulated. And that's why we're seeing suicides and things of that nature happen to young people, especially because this is all they know. And it's really important to let them know that no, this is not all there is. This is not reality. This is just a reflection, a small piece of it that we are seeing being documented into this giant technium that we're all living in here. So at the very least, I was able to verify that, in fact, Elon Musk's grandfather was a technocrat, and he seems to have been arrested as part of the ban of technocracy in Canada in the early 1940s, and he was also let go. And then, of course, getting back to the birth of May in 1948, and then, her life and her account of traveling the world and looking for, ancient lost cities and stuff like that. That does not happen randomly. Why are technocrats suddenly traveling around the world looking for ancient ruins? That's a very good question, isn't it? And again, it's not impossible to think that multiple people, higher ups, alphabet soup agencies, and the rest were aware of this situation, or perhaps even assisting in it. Now, there's also another element to the letter here that mentions May Musk's connection to Charles Manson. The claims that were presented in the letter I was not able to verify, but I'll share them with you. First off, that May Halderman, this is before she was May Musk, was arrested at age 23 in the Manson roundup. And that's something, again, I couldn't find anything on it. The letter also claims that there is a picture of May in the first original Helter Skelter book, and states that there's many reprints and fake copies. Again, I have no clue. There's no way for me to verify that, but I will share it with you all. The third thing that's mentioned here is that Tosca was conceived during a prison visit to Charlie Manson, suggesting that Elon's sister was not conceived by Errol Musk, who, by the way, as I was looking into for this video, discovered that he actually had a child with his stepdaughter. So that's the kind of folks we're dealing with. Elon Musk's alleged bloodfather, Errol Musk, having children with their stepchildren. But getting back to May and Charlie Manson, the claim in the letter here is that Tosca was conceived during a prison visit with Charlie Manson. And the claim here is that May Musk, or May Halderman, called herself Light, as in, L-I-G-H-T, I am light, like Lucifer is light, bought a van load of TVs and delivered them to the Manson gang, and instigated race riots and created chaos. And the author of the letter also mentioned that the Manson crew here, or the people assisting the Manson crew, were also working with the Imola Lane State Mental Hospital. And I looked up the Imola Lane State Mental Hospital, and it's definitely an old hospital. There are articles written about the mystery of the asylum, and there is a NapaValleyRegister.com 2-part article talking about Napa's insane asylum. And there were, at one point in the 1960s, 5,000 residents at this asylum. And it makes you wonder what kinds of experiments were conducted on these people that were basically considered castaways, or, folks that weren't able to function in society. The letter also states that May was connected to the Bilderberg, Rothschilds, and Rockefellers, etc., which would make sense if we look at the connection to the technocracy with her father, Joshua Halderman. It's very likely that they knew each other. And it suggests that May was perhaps put in place to help out the Manson family in some way, saying that she made many connections, had many prisoner armies and loyal followers. She hooked them up with TVs and everything luxurious in prison and out of prison, and that May was into African witchcraft, which would make sense. She was in South Africa as a young girl, It's possible she picked up on some rituals or some objects or things that were present there while she was in Africa. So again, these are things, no way for me to verify, but are shared in the letter, and I wanted to share with you. And let me get to Elon here, because there are a couple things on Elon as well. It says Elon liked darkness, but he wasn't allowed to watch TV, eat mac and cheese, or play with others. Now, this is interesting because it's something that I've heard in the past coming from people that have left the Illuminati families, that they're not allowed to indulge in some of the things that the regular population, the consumers, would use, because, you know, those are the unintellectual masses. They're the herd. They're the cattle. You know, we're much more elite than that. So we will not indulge in these low-level products that we are providing for the masses, that kind of attitude. So that's not that surprising. But there's another part here that a little bit hard to believe, but I will report it to you because it's in the letter. It says that this person who wrote the letter was terrified that Elon levitated. Now, maybe it was a trick. I don't know, but the claim here is that Elon levitated, and that when trying to get out of the situation that the author of this letter was in, they were told very boldly, quote, "Don't piss off the Bilderbergs." So is it possible that there is a group of elite people who have been around for a while, who saw the oncoming technologies and the potential that it had to really control the population at large, and that they have been systematically putting into place the various necessary means for us, humanity, to help build the infrastructure for this control mechanism to be put in place, which is part of what this tearing down and rebuilding in the fourth industrial revolution and sustainable development 2030 and all of these agendas are all about. Even the Trump agenda in many ways is part of the same thing, because what are they doing? Make America great again, right? We're going to go back to the industrial era. We're going to have this economic boom, all these things. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have prosperity. These are all promises made to a population that will work to help build it. And I think products like the Neuralink, maybe there is a hidden agenda behind it that is exactly what the Bible prophesied as the mark of the beast. Certainly it's one potential development, I think, from the elite perspective of a way they can carry it out. And, you know, a lot of this has to do, I believe, with God allowing it to happen to a certain degree, because if enough people become aware of this kind of thing, it's just not going to happen. People just aren't going to accept it. But the way things are going, the way our psychology are being manipulated day in, day out by these screens, it becomes much easier for them to control us. And we're seeing that take place right before our eyes. The forking of humanity, one side maintaining their humanity, the other side deciding to pursue this digital immortality, or at least help build it. Again, we're living in some wild times, and this letter, I think, isn't anything too crazy other than Elon levitating. The stuff is not out of the question. And in fact, it helped verify a certain point that was made in the letter that was something that, you know, it's not something some blogger wrote or anything like that. This was evidence that was corroborated just independently, that this Canadian article would mention a J. Halderman who was arrested for the crime of technocracy and being part of a secret organization and being let go. And that person being, and the article didn't state that this was Elon Musk's grandfather, but it was Elon Musk's grandfather. And so the technocratic tie is made. So the speculations about what is behind Elon and his real agenda is warranted, because he comes directly from a group of people that believed that technology is going to completely change society, where the engineers and technicians run everything, and the technium becomes God. And in the process, maybe we can become God, which is the polar opposite of the gospel. And in fact, there were a couple points during all of this research of putting this together where I found some anti-Christian remarks made by the technocrats, which was understandable. They hated Christianity. They thought all religion was nonsense. And so nothing new there. But I hope this makes you think. And I hope this makes you guys do your own research to see if there's other connections, especially with May Musk and Charlie Manson. Is there something there? And if there is, then the Charlie Manson story becomes very interesting in connection to all the mind control stuff that we have been learning about in this decade, as a lot of this stuff becomes declassified, as people like Aaron and Melissa Dykes puts out awesome movies like The Minds of Men. Literally, they uncover the agenda of a lot of these dark experiments. So I hope this makes you guys think. I hope this makes you guys have discussion about these issues. Ultimately, what I'm saying here is that there's no point to take the Neuralink. There's no point to die on the hill of technology. A lot of this stuff is meant for control. We can use it to spread the gospel, and that's why they really don't like people talking about Jesus and all this stuff. But the gospel becomes so relevant, so important, and all the principles that come from that, they are going to be tested in ways that we have not been tested before. And I mean that because we already are. We're already facing the effects of this unknown of technology and this middleman of algorithms that control our input and output sensations and everything else. We're living in this crazy spiritual war, but now it's becoming quantified. It's all becoming digital. And so don't forget to put on the full armor of God every single day. Protect your mind, protect your heart, seek the kingdom of God, love your neighbor as yourself, and spread the gospel, because that's what's really going to save us. That's what's really going to restore us to our intended place where all of us know we're supposed to be. None of us would be pursuing any of this stuff. And the scientists and the humanists, they wouldn't be doing that unless they knew that we were falling short of something, that we are limited in certain ways. And we are. We're fallen. They're proving the Bible true, yet they continue to reject God, and they are going to help fulfill biblical prophecy, which is bizarre, but it's true that the people that don't believe in God are actually helping fulfill the prophecies that God said would happen. But I think I've rambled on enough here. Thank you guys for your support and prayers. Please leave comments with additional information if you come across anything. I will leave all the links to what I found in the description section. Thank you, patrons, for your financial support. It really means a lot to me and my family. Age of Deceit 3, still in the works. Trailer coming soon. Canary Cry Radio, couple episodes coming up about the Bundy Ranch situation, as well as an interview with Melissa Dykes of Truth Stream Media. That's all coming up on Canary Cry Radio in the next couple weeks. Again, thank you guys for listening. Have an awesome day. God bless.